The Galactic Council chamber stretched wide before Jake Morrison as he stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Valiant. His uniform felt heavy that morning, weighted down by expectations and the knowledge of what was to come. Beside him, Claire Hayes checked her datapad for the 10th time, reviewing notes that both of them had memorized days ago. They were heading into another meeting with the elder races. Another session where humanity would ask for basic respect and likely receive nothing but dismissive gestures and patronizing smiles. Earth had achieved faster-than-light travel only 30 years ago, a breakthrough that should have been celebrated across human civilization. Instead, it had opened the door to a galaxy that viewed them as children playing with toys they barely understood. The elder races had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They had built empires, fought wars, and established laws that governed trade and territory across hundreds of systems. To them, humanity was an amusing curiosity at best and an irritating nuisance at worst. Nathan Cole stood ready in the diplomatic bay, adjusting his formal robes one last time. He had been Earth's chief ambassador for 5 years now, 5 long years of eating insults at every meal and swallowing his pride before bed each night. The instructions from Earth's government were always the same. Be patient, be diplomatic, be courteous no matter what they say or do. Humanity needed allies, needed trade routes, needed technology that could help their colonies survive in the harsh reality of space. They could not afford to make enemies, not yet. The council station grew larger on the view screen as the Valiant approached. It was a massive structure, built by a civilization that had fallen to dust 10,000 years ago, but whose architecture still surpassed anything humanity could construct. 47 different species maintained offices there, each one representing governments and empires that spanned multiple star systems. Earth had a small office on the lower levels, tucked between the waste reclamation facility and a storage area that nobody used anymore. Inside the council chamber, the representatives gathered in their assigned seats. High Chancellor Vexthar of the Krellian Empire took his place at the upper tier, his 4 eyes scanning the room with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The Krellians had been the dominant military power in this sector for 3 centuries. Their ships patrolled the major trade routes, their soldiers enforced the council's decisions, and their government held veto power over most significant votes. They tolerated humanity the way a noble might tolerate a stray dog in their garden, with amusement as long as it caused no trouble. Councillor Zephine represented the Aurelian Dominion, her crystalline form reflecting light and patterns that other species found beautiful, but humans could barely perceive. The Aurelians controlled most of the advanced technology markets, selling innovations to younger races at prices that kept those races dependent on Aurelian goodwill. They had offered Earth a few basic technologies over the years, always at costs that strained human resources, and always with conditions that limited how those technologies could be used. Nathan took his position in the center speaking area, the place reserved for petitioners and junior members who had not yet earned the right to a permanent seat. He had stood in this exact spot dozens of times before, making reasonable requests that were treated as jokes. Today would be no different, but he would play his role because that was what Earth needed him to do. The petition was simple enough. Earth wanted permission to establish a trade corridor through the Sentinel Nebula. The route would cut travel time between human colonies by weeks, and would benefit several other species whose territories bordered the nebula. It was a reasonable request backed by solid data and economic projections that showed mutual benefit for all parties involved. Vexthar listened to the presentation with visible boredom. When Nathan finished speaking, the Chancellor leaned forward with a smile that showed too many teeth. His response was delivered in a tone one might use with a child who had just suggested building a castle in the clouds. The humans wanted to petition for trade routes? How amusing. Perhaps when humanity had been traveling space for a few more centuries, they would understand why their suggestions were impractical. The council would take the petition under advisement, which everyone in the room understood meant it would be filed away and forgotten by tomorrow. Zephine added her own commentary, her voice carrying harmonics that translated as barely concealed laughter. Earth had been spacefaring for 30 years and thought they understood stellar navigation. The Aurelians had been mapping these routes for 10,000 years. What could humans possibly teach civilizations that had been crossing the galaxy since before humanity had discovered fire? The suggestion itself showed how little Earth, understood about the complexities of galactic trade and politics. Jake watched from the observation deck as Nathan stood there absorbing the insults with practiced grace. Every word was designed to diminish, to remind humans of their place at the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. The other species in the chamber added their own comments, each one piling on with the casual cruelty of beings who had never considered that the target of their mockery might one day become a threat. The session lasted 3 hours. When it finally ended, Nathan returned to the Valiant with the same empty hands he had brought. Jake met him in the corridor outside the diplomatic bay. No words were exchanged because none were needed. They had both known how this would go before the meeting started. This was simply what humanity had to endure for now. In the crew mess hall, the mood matched the results. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb sat with his meal untouched, staring at the wall with the expression of a man who wanted to hit something but knew better. He spoke what everyone was thinking. How much longer would Earth tolerate being treated like ignorant children? When would humanity finally stand up and show these arrogant species what humans were capable of achieving? Jake's response was measured and careful. As long as necessary, that was the answer. Earth needed time to build its fleet, to strengthen its colonies, to develop the infrastructure necessary to stand on equal footing with civilizations that had centuries of advantage. Playing the long game meant accepting short-term humiliation in exchange for long-term survival. It was logical, it was necessary, and it burned like acid in the throats of everyone who had to live through it. But what the elder races did not know, what they had no reason to suspect, was that Earth had been preparing for something beyond mere survival. While diplomats smiled and absorbed insults, while ambassadors made polite requests that were dismissed with laughter, Earth's military had been working on projects that would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in facilities that existed on no public records, scientists and engineers were solving problems that the elder races had declared unsolvable. Admiral Helen Carter commanded Earth's defense forces from a base that most humans did not know existed. She received regular reports from Nathan and Jake, reading between the diplomatic language to understand the true state of affairs. Every insult delivered to Earth's representatives was noted and filed. Every act of aggression against human ships was documented. Every moment of humiliation was recorded and remembered. The question was not whether Earth would respond, but when that response would come and how devastating it would be. The research facilities hummed with activity day and night. Dr. Paul Sanders led the quantum drive project, working with theories that would make human ships faster than anything currently flying through space. The mathematics involved were complex beyond what most species had achieved, built on fundamental insights into the nature of reality that Earth scientists had developed independently. When the drives were ready, human vessels would be able to cross distances in hours that took other species weeks to traverse. Dr. Lisa Chen commanded the Weapons Research Division in an adjacent facility. Her team worked on systems designed to make conventional shields and armor obsolete. The weapons they were developing operated on principles that the elder races had either not discovered or had dismissed as impossible. When these systems were deployed, the balance of military power would shift overnight. The colonies scattered across human space continued their work, building infrastructure and establishing the economic base that would support everything else. On New Terra, Governor Linda Martinez dealt with the daily reality of trying to protect colonists from pirates and raiders who knew that human ships could not effectively fight back. Krellian vessels demanded protection fees for safe passage, taking cargo and supplies while human captains filed protests that nobody would address. The raiders operated with impunity because everyone knew Earth lacked the strength to stop them, but that was changing with every day that passed. In shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and nebulas where sensors could not easily penetrate, Earth was building a fleet that would shock the galaxy when it was finally revealed. These were not the simple vessels that currently flew under Earth's flag. These were warships designed from the ground up to incorporate every advantage that human science could provide. They would be fast, deadly, and equipped with technology that would make them nearly impossible. The Krellian patrol cruiser Ventok moved through space with the casual arrogance of a predator that had never known fear. Captain Drexnor had been running this patrol route for 6 months now, intercepting human vessels and collecting what he called protection fees. It was easy work and profitable enough that he had started to view these runs as a gift rather than a duty. The humans always protested, always filed complaints with authorities who would never investigate, and always paid what was demanded. They were weak, predictable, and entirely harmless. His tactical officer called out another contact on the scanners. The Morning Star, a human freighter registered out of New Terra, carrying industrial equipment and medical supplies according to its public manifest. Drexenor ordered the standard intercept approach, already calculating how much he could extract from this particular vessel before letting it continue on its way. His crew moved into position with practiced efficiency, weapons powered but not yet targeting. There was rarely any need for actual violence when dealing with humans. The Morning Star did not attempt to run when ordered to stop. It did not broadcast distress calls or pleas for mercy. It simply halted its forward motion and waited as the Krellian cruiser approached. This was normal behavior for human vessels, and Drexenor felt the familiar satisfaction of knowing his prey had already accepted defeat. Captain Ryan Foster stood on the bridge of the Morning Star watching the Krellian ship draw closer. His crew maintained their positions in silence, each one knowing exactly what was about to happen. In the cargo bay, the equipment listed on their manifest was undergoing a transformation that would have shocked anyone watching. Panels slid aside, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden in plain sight. Power conduits that appeared to serve industrial machinery actually fed into military-grade capacitors. The freighter was about to show its true nature. Drexenor's face appeared on the communication screen, wearing the expression of someone who had done this so many times that boredom had replaced any sense of satisfaction. His demand was simple and direct. The Morning Star would prepare to be boarded. All cargo would be inspected. Appropriate fees would be collected. Resistance would result in the seizure of the vessel and the arrest of its crew. The threat was delivered casually because it had always been sufficient in the past. Ryan listened to the entire speech without interrupting. When Drexenor finished, Ryan made his counter-proposal in a calm voice that carried no hint of fear or submission. The Krellian captain should turn his ship around and return to Krellian space immediately. Do this now and the incident would be forgotten. Continue on this course and there would be consequences that Drexenor would not enjoy. The Krellian captain's laughter filled the bridge of the Morning Star. This was unexpected entertainment. A human actually attempting to issue threats. It was absurd enough to be amusing. Drexenor repeated his demand, adding that the Morning Star should power down its engines immediately or face having them disabled by force. His weapons officer began targeting solutions more out of habit than any real expectation of needing them. Ryan cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. The order was simple and had been practiced dozens of times in simulation. Commander Hayes was authorized to fire when ready. There was no hesitation, no moment of doubt or reconsideration. Earth had issued its warning to the galaxy. The Krellians had chosen to ignore that warning. Now they would learn what that choice cost. The Morning Star had never been just a freighter. It was part of a fleet of disguised warships that Earth had been quietly building and deploying over the past year. The industrial equipment in the cargo bay was actually a sophisticated weapons system that had been developed specifically to counter the type of shields and armor that Krellian ships relied on. When the hull panels fell away, they revealed weapon ports that glowed with ready power. The plasma lance fired first. It was a focused beam of superheated matter accelerated to near light speed by magnetic fields that could tear apart molecular bonds. The beam struck the Krellian cruiser's shields and passed through them as if they were not there at all. The technology behind those shields was 300 years old, developed by Krellian scientists who had never imagined that anyone might find a way to completely bypass their protection. The beam carved into the engine section, melting through armor and critical systems in a fraction of a second. The second shot followed immediately, targeting the weapons array with the same devastating effect. Drexenor's tactical board lit up with damage warnings and system failures. His shields were gone, his engines were offline, and his weapons had been reduced to molten metal. The entire engagement had lasted 14 seconds from first shot to complete disable. His crew stared at their consoles in shock, unable to process what had just happened. Ryan Foster's face reappeared on Drexenor's screen. The expression he wore now was colder than anything the Krellian had expected to see on a human face. The message was delivered in clear, precise language. Drexenor had 10 minutes to evacuate his crew to escape pods. After that, the Morning Star would finish destroying his ship. When he reached safety, he should deliver a message to Krellian High Command. The era of easy prey had ended. Earth was done being patient, done being diplomatic, and done tolerating attacks on its vessels. 9 minutes later, the Ventok ceased to exist. The Morning Star's weapons reduced it to expanding debris, ensuring that no trace of the vessel's systems could be recovered and analyzed. The escape pods were left untouched, floating in space where they would be picked up by other Krellian vessels within hours. The survivors would tell their story, and that story would spread through the Krellian military like wildfire. But the Morning Star was not the only surprise that Earth had prepared. In the Sentinel Nebula, the same region where Earth had requested permission to establish a trade route, a Krellian supply convoy discovered that the humans had decided permission was no longer necessary. Commander Blake Richardson commanded a small fleet of Earth destroyers that materialized directly in the middle of the convoy's formation, appearing from quantum jumps that should not have been possible at such close range. The broadcast went out on all frequencies. The Krellian vessels were in violation of trade regulations that Earth was now enforcing. They would surrender their ships immediately or face consequences similar to what the Ventok had experienced. The convoy commander tried to bluster and threaten, insisting that Earth had no authority in this region and that this action would be considered an act of war. Blake's response was to demonstrate a technology that made the Krellian commander's blood run cold. A single missile launched from the Striker, Earth's lead destroyer. The missile struck the lead transport vessel, and that vessel simply vanished. It had not been destroyed, had not exploded or been reduced to debris. It had been removed from normal space entirely, teleported into a dimensional pocket where it would remain until Earth decided to release it. The crew was unharmed, but they were also completely helpless, trapped in a space between spaces where nothing they did would matter. The convoy surrendered within minutes. Not a single shot had been fired after that first demonstration. The remaining ships were escorted to a human facility where their crews would be detained until the situation could be formally resolved through proper diplomatic channels. The cargo they had been carrying, mostly luxury goods destined for Krellian markets, was seized as evidence of illegal trading activities. News traveled fast through the galactic communication networks. Within hours, every major government knew that Earth had engaged Krellian forces and had done so with devastating effectiveness. The details varied depending on who was telling the story, but the core facts remained constant. Human ships had destroyed or captured Krellian vessels using technology that was far beyond what anyone had expected Earth to possess. Emergency sessions were called in council chambers across multiple sectors. High Chancellor Vexthar demanded explanations, his four eyes wide with something that looked uncomfortably close to fear. How had the humans developed such weapons? Where had they acquired this technology? More importantly, how many ships did they have with these capabilities? Ambassador Nathan Cole sat in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, and his entire demeanor had changed from previous appearances. Gone was the patient diplomat who had absorbed insults with practiced grace. In his place sat a representative of a species that had just demonstrated it possessed both the capability and the willingness to use lethal force when threatened. His statement to the council was brief and delivered without any trace of the deference that had characterized his previous speeches. Earth had issued a warning that was clear and unambiguous. That warning had been ignored, dismissed with laughter, and treated as a joke by species who should have known better. Krellian forces had continued to attack human vessels, had continued to demand tribute, had continued to act as if Earth would tolerate such behavior indefinitely. The actions taken against Krellian ships were defensive measures, proportional responses to ongoing aggression. If the Council wanted to discuss acts of war, then they should start by examining the Krellian campaign of piracy against human interests. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the third time in 3 weeks, but the atmosphere in the chamber had transformed completely from previous gatherings. Every seat was filled, with representatives from all major powers present and paying attention in a way they never had when Earth had been petitioning for basic respect. The casual dismissiveness that had characterized earlier sessions had been replaced by tension and barely concealed concern. Ambassador Nathan Cole entered the chamber flanked by Commander Jake Morrison and Admiral Helen Carter. The symbolism was deliberate and impossible to miss. Earth was no longer sending just diplomats to these meetings. They were sending the people who commanded the ships and weapons that had just humiliated two of the galaxy's most powerful military forces. The message was clear before anyone spoke a single word. High Chancellor Vexthar opened the session with a voice that lacked its usual condescending tone. The council had assembled to discuss what he carefully termed the recent acts of aggression committed by human forces against multiple sovereign powers. His choice of words was calculated to put Earth on the defensive, to frame the discussion as if humanity were the party that needed to justify its actions. Nathan stepped forward and immediately challenged the framing of the discussion. Acts of aggression was an interesting phrase to use when describing Earth's response to systematic harassment, illegal boarding of civilian vessels, extortion, and in 3 documented cases, the murder of human colonists. Earth had warned the Council that patience had limits. The elder races had chosen not to believe that warning. The consequences of that choice were now evident to everyone. Councillor Zephine's crystalline form pulsed with visible agitation as she listed Earth's recent actions. A Krellian military vessel had been destroyed. A convoy under sovereign protection had been attacked and captured. An Aurelian system had been violated by a military fleet. These actions could not be ignored or dismissed. They represented a fundamental challenge to the established order that had maintained peace for centuries. Admiral Helen Carter stepped forward and met Zephine's accusations with cold facts. Earth had defended its interests with remarkable restraint, considering the level of provocation. The Krellian vessel had been given warning and opportunity to withdraw before weapons were fired. The convoy had been engaged in activities that any reasonable definition would classify as piracy. The fleet that entered Aurelian space had not fired a single shot. If the Council wanted to discuss violations of law and order, then they should examine the 47 documented incidents of elder race forces attacking human ships in the past year alone. The chamber erupted into arguments and counter-arguments. Accusations flew between different factions while others attempted to restore order. Jake Morrison watched carefully from his position, observing how different species reacted to the confrontation. Fear was evident in some, anger dominated others. But underneath everything else was a current of uncertainty that had not existed before. The elder races were facing a reality they had never seriously considered. They were no longer the undisputed powers of the galaxy, the grand mediator, a neutral entity that rarely intervened directly, raised its appendage to request silence. When the chamber had quieted, it spoke with a voice that carried weight beyond any individual government. The Council had to acknowledge that fundamental changes had occurred in galactic dynamics. Humanity had demonstrated capabilities that previous assessments had failed to identify. The question facing them was not whether these actions were justified, but rather, how everyone would proceed from this point forward. War Commander Thexcal of the Krellian military rose to his feet, his posture radiating aggression. His species had been humiliated by what he termed upstart humans who had destroyed Krellian ships and insulted Krellian honor. This could not stand, would not be tolerated. The Krellian Empire would respond with force to restore the proper order of things. Other species needed to see that challenging established powers carried consequences. Helen Carter's response was delivered in a flat, emotionless tone that somehow made it more threatening than any shouted challenge. If the Krellians wanted to bring their fleets against Earth, they were welcome to try. They should test human defenses and see how well that worked out for them. But before making that decision, they might want to consider what had happened to their best warship. It had been disabled in 14 seconds. That engagement had been conducted with restraint. Earth had been holding back. If the Krellians forced a real war, they would discover exactly how much humanity had been holding back. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Every species present understood military mathematics. If Earth could cripple a Krellian cruiser that quickly while operating under rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties, what could they do when those restraints were removed? The implications were sobering for anyone who took time to think them through. Nathan stepped forward again to redirect the conversation towards something more productive than threats and posturing. Earth had never wanted war. They had come to the galactic community seeking partnership, trade, and mutual benefit. They had been met with contempt at every turn. Their ships had been harassed, their colonists threatened, their legitimate concerns dismissed as if they were children begging for attention. The elder races had forced Earth to prove they deserved basic respect. That proof had now been delivered. The Grand Mediator asked the question that everyone was thinking but few wanted to voice. Now that Earth had the attention of the entire galactic community, what did they actually want? What were the terms that would allow everyone to move forward from this crisis without further violence? Nathan's answer was direct and uncompromising. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power with full rights and protections under galactic law. Human trade routes would be respected without harassment or illegal fees. Human colonies would be left in peace to develop according to their own needs and preferences. These were not requests or petitions. They were statements of reality that the Council needed to acknowledge. In exchange for this recognition, Earth would share technological advances that would benefit multiple species. Dr. Paul Sanders entered the chamber at this point, his presence having been carefully coordinated for maximum impact. The scientist carried data files that contained information the elder races would find very interesting. He explained that humanity had not spent 30 years advancing only military technology. Earth had made breakthroughs in medical science, agricultural systems, and computational theory. They had solutions to problems that had plagued elder races for generations. The mood in the chamber shifted as Paul displayed research data on crystalline degradation syndrome, a condition that had been killing Aurelians for centuries. Human scientists had developed a treatment based on quantum biological principles that could not just slow the disease but actually cure it. Millions of Aurelian lives could be saved. But Earth was not going to share this treatment while being treated as inferior members of the galactic community. Dr. Lisa Chen presented additional breakthroughs in agricultural science that could end food scarcity on multiple worlds, crop systems that operated with greater efficiency than anything currently available, medical treatments for diseases that the elder races had accepted as simply part of life. Earth had gifts to offer the galaxy, but those gifts would only be shared between equals. The calculations played out across the faces of council members. They were weighing military fear against scientific promise. Earth had demonstrated it could hurt them, but they were now offering to help them instead. The carrot and the stick were both on the table, and the choice of which one the galaxy would receive depended entirely on how they responded to Earth's demands. Nathan introduced another element into the negotiation, one that shifted the entire dynamic of the discussion. The Zephyr crisis was something every spacefaring species understood and feared. A dark matter anomaly in the galactic core had been expanding for decades, threatening to destabilize entire star systems over the next century. The elder races had been studying the problem for years without finding any workable solution. Paul Sanders brought up holographic displays showing Earth's analysis of the anomaly. Human scientists believed they could solve the Zephyr crisis using the same quantum field manipulation technology that powered their drives and weapons. The mathematics were complex but sound. It would require 10 years of coordinated effort involving multiple species, but the crisis was solvable. Earth had the key to saving billions of lives across dozens of worlds. The revelation hit the Council like a physical blow. The Zephyr crisis was an existential threat that transcended politics and pride. If humanity could truly solve it, then every calculation about the balance of power had to be revised. This was not just about respecting Earth because they had powerful weapons. This was about acknowledging that humanity possessed scientific capabilities that exceeded anything the elder races had achieved. War Commander Thex Kal stood again, but his posture had changed slightly. Pride still dominated his bearing, but pragmatism was beginning to temper his response. He asked what would happen if the Council refused Earth's terms. 6 months had passed since the signing of the revised Galactic Accords, and humanity was settling into its new role among the major powers of the galaxy. The transition was not smooth and tensions remained high along several borders. The elder races had accepted Earth's demands because they had no practical choice, but acceptance under duress was not the same as genuine recognition. Fear and respect created an unstable peace that could fracture under the right circumstances. Captain Jake Morrison, recently promoted from his previous rank, commanded the newly commissioned EFS Unity. The battlecruiser was Earth's most advanced warship, designed to serve as a symbol of human military capability, while also functioning as a diplomatic platform. Jake's current mission was a tour of Allied systems, showing the flag and reinforcing the new power structure through simple presence. The Unity was impressive enough that its appearance in a system made a statement without anyone needing to say a word. Claire Hayes, now serving as his executive officer with her own promotion, reviewed intelligence reports in the officers' mess. The data showed military buildups along several borders, particularly in Krellian space. Nothing overtly threatening had occurred, but the numbers were significant enough to warrant attention. The Krellians were expanding their fleet in sectors that bordered human territory. Jake studied the same reports and recognized what was happening. The Krellians were preparing for something. They had signed the accords because Earth had given them no choice, but that forced acceptance had cost them tremendous political capital. The faction that advocated for peaceful relations with humanity had been weakened. The military faction, led by officers who wanted revenge for perceived humiliation, was gaining influence and resources. Claire asked whether the Krellians could really be foolish enough to try again after what had happened to their forces. Jake's response reflected his understanding of psychology and politics. Wounded pride was a powerful motivator. The Krellian Empire had been the dominant military power for 3 centuries. Being forced to acknowledge human equality had shattered their collective identity. They needed to believe that their previous losses had been flukes, accidents, or the result of surprise rather than genuine superiority. Testing Earth again was almost inevitable. Admiral Helen Carter shared similar concerns in meetings on Earth with the Global Defense Council. The massive holographic displays in the war room showed military activity across multiple sectors. The Krellians were not the only ones making moves. The Aurelian Dominion was upgrading its fleet beyond normal replacement cycles. The Zarnox Collective, a minor power that had previously stayed neutral, was conducting war games near human colonies. General Marcus Stone, who commanded Earth's marine forces, suggested a preemptive response. Hit them hard enough that they remembered the lesson permanently. Show overwhelming force before they could organize into a genuine threat. The logic was sound from a purely military standpoint, but Helen rejected it immediately. That approach was exactly what the elder races wanted. They wanted Earth to fire first to become the aggressor. Such an action would give them political justification to form a coalition against humanity. Earth would face not just the Krellians, but potentially dozens of species united by fear of human expansion. Dr. Paul Sanders entered the council meeting with troubling intelligence from scientific channels. Multiple powers were attempting to reverse engineer Earth's quantum technology. They had acquired debris from destroyed vessels and were analyzing it in laboratories across the galaxy. The effort was coordinated and well-funded, suggesting that several governments were pooling resources to solve the problem of human technological superiority. Ambassador Nathan Cole, who had returned to Earth for consultations, asked whether these efforts could succeed. Paul admitted that eventually they might. Earth's mathematics were revolutionary, but mathematics could be replicated once someone understood the underlying principles. It would take years, possibly decades, but human technological advantage would not last forever. The real problem was what desperate governments might do before they achieved parity. The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Captain Ryan Foster was conducting a routine patrol near the human colony of New Haven when his sensors detected a massive energy buildup in the neighboring system. The readings were unlike anything his science officer had seen before. A gravitational anomaly was forming, growing stronger with each passing minute. If the readings were accurate, someone was attempting to generate an artificial black hole. Ryan's blood went cold when he understood the implications. He ordered immediate evacuation of the colony and sent a priority alert to Fleet Command. Every ship within range needed to respond immediately. New Haven had maybe 4 hours before whatever was happening in the next system affected them. If someone was weaponizing gravity on this scale, the results would be catastrophic. The Krellian plan was brutal in its simplicity. If they could not match Earth's technology, they would use brute force on a cosmic scale. 6 dreadnoughts had been positioned to generate a gravitational cascade that would create a temporary singularity. The singularity would consume the New Haven colony and demonstrate that human shields and defensive systems were not truly invincible. It would show that Earth could be hurt, could be killed, could be defeated if someone was willing to pay the price. Jake Morrison's Unity was the closest military vessel, but even at maximum quantum drive, they were 3 hours away. He ordered immediate deployment while calculating whether they could arrive in time. Claire ran the numbers and delivered bad news. Even if they left immediately, the colony had maybe 4 hours before the cascade became irreversible. The Unity would arrive with minutes to spare at best, not enough time to stop what was happening. Jake pulled up specifications for a system that had been developed but never tested at operational scale. The quantum displacement field was designed to move massive objects across vast distances instantaneously. In theory, it could relocate an entire colony to a safe location before the singularity formed. In practice, nobody knew whether the system would work, or whether the attempt would overload the Unity's reactor and kill everyone aboard. His chief engineer protested immediately. The power requirements alone would drain every system on the ship. They would have to route power from weapons, shields, and life support beyond critical areas. Even then, the reactor might not handle the load. They could burn out their entire power system attempting this. Jake's response was simple and absolute. Then they would burn it out. The alternative was 40,000 dead colonists. Helm received orders to position the Unity directly above New Haven. Engineering began routing power from every available system into the displacement array. Weapons went offline. Shields dropped to minimum levels, and life support was reduced to critical areas only. Everything else went into charging the displacement field. The Unity dropped out of quantum drive directly above New Haven. Below them, chaos reigned as colonists scrambled to reach shelters. They could see the spatial distortions forming in the sky as the gravitational cascade approached. Most of them did not understand they were about to witness something unprecedented in the history of space travel. Claire reported that the Krellian vessels were demanding the Unity withdraw immediately. War Commander Thexcal himself was in command of the operation. He claimed this was a demonstration of Krellian resolve and stated clearly that any interference would be considered an act of war. The Krellians were committed to their course of action. Jake opened a channel directly to Thexcal. His message was delivered in a cold, flat tone. The Krellians were attempting to murder 40,000 civilians to make a political point. Stand down now, and Earth would treat this as a catastrophic error in judgment. Continue, and Earth would show them what real consequences looked like. The warning was clear and unambiguous. Thexcal's response was dismissive. Human threats were meaningless. The Unity was alone, outnumbered 6-1. Earth could not stop what had already begun. The gravitational cascade had reached the point where shutting down would take longer than letting it complete. The Krellians had passed the point of no return. Jake's response was simple. He was not there to stop the cascade. He was there to save his people. What happened to the Krellian fleet afterward would be entirely up to them. The displacement field activated in that moment, and the Unity became a beacon of quantum energy visible across the entire system. The entire colony began to shimmer with translucent light. Every building, every person, every developed square meter of land entered a quantum state of superposition. The mathematics involved were elegant and terrifyingly complex. The system was calculating the quantum state of every atom in the colony and preparing to relocate all of them simultaneously across 3 light-years of space. The science officer called out field coherence levels as they climbed. 90% and rising. 95% and holding. Displacement would occur in 30 seconds. The entire crew held their collective breath as the Unity's reactor groaned under a load it was never designed to handle. Warning indicators covered every engineering console, but the system held together through determination and perhaps a bit of luck. 1 year had passed since the New Haven incident, and the galaxy had settled into an equilibrium that could best be described as tense but stable. Earth continued its expansion across multiple sectors, establishing new colonies and opening trade routes, while maintaining a military presence that kept potential threats cautious. The trial of War Commander Thexcal had concluded with guilty verdicts and sentences harsh enough to serve as warning to anyone who might consider similar actions. High Chancellor Vexthar had been forced into retirement, replaced by Chancellor Miravan, who understood that cooperation with humanity was not just idealistic, but pragmatically necessary. Admiral Jake Morrison, promoted again after the New Haven rescue, now commanded Earth's Third Fleet from the bridge of the Unity. His fleet was stationed at the frontier, the shifting boundary between human space and territories controlled by elder races who still harbored resentment about Earth's rapid rise. The political landscape had shifted dramatically over the past year. The Aurelian Dominion, grateful for medical treatments that had saved millions of their people, had become humanity's strongest ally. Even the Zarnox Collective, previously hostile, now engaged in profitable trade that benefited both parties. But Admiral Helen Carter's intelligence network detected patterns beneath this surface calm that suggested serious trouble brewing. A coalition was forming in the shadows, composed of hardliners from multiple species who refused to accept the new galactic order. These were officers and politicians who believed that the elder races had been humiliated and needed to restore their proper place in the hierarchy of power. Helen briefed the Earth Defense Council on what intelligence had gathered. The group called themselves the Restoration Front, and their stated goal was exactly what the name suggested. They wanted to restore the old power structure by eliminating Earth as a major player in galactic politics. Recruitment had been ongoing for months across a dozen different species, drawing from military factions that felt betrayed by their own government's acceptance of human demands. President Elena Rodriguez, Earth's recently elected global leader, asked the critical question about numbers and capabilities. Helen admitted that precise figures were unknown but certainly significant. Intelligence suggested at least 40 capital ships, though the real number might be twice that if the Restoration Front had been successfully hiding assets in remote sectors. They were planning something large, something designed to fundamentally change the current situation. Dr. Paul Sanders added his analysis from the Scientific Intelligence Division. Earth's quantum detection network had picked up unusual energy signatures in the Veil Nebula, a region notorious for sensor interference. Someone was building something massive out there, and they were deliberately using old generation power systems that would not trigger Earth's advanced monitoring. The energy output suggested construction on an unprecedented scale. President Rodriguez asked whether this was a weapon being built. Paul confirmed that this was the most likely explanation, something designed to counter Earth's technological advantages through sheer scale, rather than matching human sophistication. If someone built a weapon large enough, they might overcome the qualitative gap through quantitative advantage. The answer came 2 weeks later when the Restoration Front revealed itself through coordinated action. 3 human colonies came under simultaneous attack from fleets numbering in the hundreds. New Frontier, Liberty Station, and Port Darwin all reported hostile forces entering their systems and engaging defensive platforms. The attacks were synchronized and overwhelming, designed to bypass Earth's defensive advantages through pure numbers. Jake Morrison's Third Fleet responded to the New Frontier attack. They arrived to find the colony under siege from 78 warships representing a dozen different species. The Restoration Front had assembled vessels from defunct militaries, pirate organizations, and sympathetic governments into a massive armada. The ships were outdated by modern standards, but there were so many of them that quantity threatened to overcome quality. Jake broadcast on all frequencies as his fleet took up defensive positions. This was Admiral Morrison of Earth's Third Fleet. The hostile forces were attacking sovereign human territory. Stand down immediately or face destruction. The warning was clear and gave the Restoration Front one last opportunity to withdraw before combat began. The response came from a voice Jake recognized. Former Subcommander Drexnor, the Krellian officer whose ship had been crippled in the first engagement a year ago, now commanded forces for the Restoration Front. His message rejected Earth's sovereignty entirely. Humanity was an aberration, a species that had risen too far and too fast through luck and tricks. Today the galaxy would correct its mistake and restore proper order. Claire Hayes, now a captain commanding her own destroyer within Jake's fleet, opened a private channel to express concern about the odds. The Third Fleet had 30 ships against nearly 80 enemy vessels. Even with technological superiority, these numbers presented a genuine challenge. People were going to die today on both sides, possibly in significant numbers. Jake's response was to activate the fleet-wide tactical network. All 30 human ships linked into a single coordinated system, sharing sensor data and targeting information in real time. Earth's advantage was not just in individual ship capabilities, but in the ability to fight as one unified organism. The elder races still thought in terms of individual vessels and commanders. Humans had learned to think as a collective intelligence. The battle began with the Restoration Front's attack run. 78 ships advanced in coordinated waves, attempting to overwhelm human positions through concentrated fire. But Jake's fleet did not meet them in a traditional engagement. Instead, the human ships vanished from their positions, quantum drives allowing them to jump directly into the heart of the enemy formation. What followed demonstrated why Earth had become the dominant military power in the sector. Human vessels appeared and disappeared seemingly at random, firing precisely targeted shots that disabled enemy ships without destroying them. The quantum displacement technology that had saved New Haven was now weaponized, teleporting enemy vessels into collision courses with each other. Defensive shields phased in and out of normal space-time, making human ships nearly impossible to target effectively with conventional weapons. 20 minutes into the engagement, the Restoration Front's attack on New Frontier collapsed completely. 40 ships had been disabled, 20 more had fled the system, and the remainder found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had taken only minor damage. The technological gap was simply too wide. Numbers could not overcome the fundamental difference in capability. Similar patterns played out at Liberty Station and Port Darwin. Earth's 4th and 5th fleets demonstrated the same tactical superiority, defeating numerically superior forces through coordination and technology. By the time all 3 battles concluded, the Restoration Front had lost over 200 ships, while Earth's casualties totaled 3 vessels destroyed and 12 significantly damaged. But the Restoration Front had anticipated losses in direct combat. Their real plan had always been about the installation in the Veil Nebula. Deep in that sensor-obscuring region, a massive weapon activated. It was a quantum disruption field generator, designed to blanket all of human space and disable every advanced system Earth's military relied on. The field would collapse quantum states, rendering Earth's drives, weapons, and shields completely useless. Drexnor broadcast to all human-controlled space as the weapon powered up. The Restoration Front could not match human technology, so they would destroy it instead. In 5 minutes, every quantum system across human territory would collapse. Human ships would be left helpless, unable to maneuver or fight. Colonies would lose power as their quantum reactors failed. Earth would return to being the weak species they had always been underneath their technological tricks, and the elder races would reclaim their rightful position in the galactic order. Jake Morrison watched the countdown with surprising calm. He ordered Claire to relay a message to Fleet Command using a specific code phrase: "Execute Protocol Omega." The order went out across all human forces simultaneously. This was the moment they had prepared for, the scenario that scientists had wargamed for months. Claire protested that Protocol Omega had never been tested at operational scale. The theory was sound, but nobody knew whether it would actually work when applied to an entire fleet under combat conditions. The risks were enormous and the consequences of failure would be catastrophic. Jake's response was simple. Now seemed like an excellent time to find out whether the theory matched reality. Either Protocol Omega worked or Earth was about to lose everything they had built. There was no middle ground, no safe alternative to try first. The quantum disruption field activated and spread across human space like an invisible wave of destruction. Restoration Front forces moved forward immediately, expecting to find human vessels adrift and defenseless. Victory seemed assured. The technical advantage that had made Earth so dangerous was being stripped away. Soon this would be a fair fight and numbers would carry the day. Instead of helpless ships, they found vessels that were transforming.